Hi everyone. How you doing today? Well, it's a balmy 27 degrees Fahrenheit outside right now. I gotta tell you, that's warm compared to recently. Wow, it's so warm. Welcome to my Wednesday show, and it's good to see you all. I am happy to have you around. If you are a regular viewer, you will notice I'm adding some new changes like opening and closing credits. And if you're brand new, well, welcome. Um, this week, I am going to talk about a couple of different things. I want to talk about the differences and similarities of writing fiction and nonfiction. Um, because I write both. I love it when people say, what do you write? Because the answer is yes. And that's it. Um, so my first published book was a small self-help book that came out, I don't know, about probably 8 or 9 years ago now. Um, and it's called The Message of the Maxims. And it is a book designed to help people reflect on themselves in the view of the maxims, which are these pithy little Greek sayings that were written on plaques outside of the Temple of Apollo and in other places around Greece. So it was a reflective book. It did very well. I'm very pleased with that one. Um, the next book I wrote was my first vampire novel, which was Bloodstone. The second book I wrote was the second book in the series, which was Bloodwater. The third book I wrote was that's been published. let me get in there. Was the Reenactors Cookbook, and the next one will be the Van Life Cookbook. And so the you can see I went nonfiction, fiction, nonfiction, and in between there I worked on a pure science fiction novel this past November. And the year before that, I wrote a fantasy novel, neither of which are anywhere close to ready for publication. I need to go through them and rework them. They were word vomit from NaNoWriMo. And as much as I love NaNoWriMo, and I heartily encourage everybody to enjoy it, it does not give you a finished product. It gives you something to work from. And neither of those are ready to go out in any way, shape, or form. So there's that. The nonfiction I've wrote ranges from self-help through. I have a book that is about halfway done that I started working on about my grandmother's life, and it's fictionalized. So I suppose one would say it's historical romance because it's about her relationship with my grandfather and how they got where they did and how they ended up with me. But again, it's not complete. It hasn't been finished writing. I have the first half of it written. And let me tell you, I won NaNoWriMo with it, and it's only half finished, and I've worked on it since. That tells you how thick. It's going to be one of those really juicy ones, but it's fun. And I think people will enjoy it if I ever get it out. So that's historical fiction, self-help, cookbook, vampire novels, sci-fi, and fantasy. I literally will write anything. It's true. I'm a writing slut. I like to write and I'm fairly good at it. And so it is the thing which I do to um, keep my head on straight, I guess it would be the right answer. Um, so when you're writing fiction, you're dependent on your brain. And so you spend a lot of time sort of going over how you make your how you make your world and your plots. So with my vampire novels, that wasn't difficult because it's basically our world, but there are some things I had to know how the rules of magic worked, and I had to understand how someone becomes a vampire, and I mean, all that stuff. So there's a lot of background to it. For a standalone fictional novel, you don't really need to keep track of that. It only needs to be as good as your as good as your storyline. So it has to be internally consistent, but not consistent across books. But if you write a second book, all of a sudden it matters. And when I wrote my Bloodstone originally, I had no clue what I was doing. I mean, I understood the basic principles of writing fiction. I've taken enough courses in it, but I had never I had never really sat down and wrote a whole book. And so I kind of word vomited, then went back, cleaned it up, and I love it. It's a wonderful thing. It's just fantastical. Um, but then when I sat down to write Blood Water, suddenly I realized I needed a timeline for book one because I had to know when all these vampires were made and where they were made because it matters. Because it changes how they think about the world. A person who was born in the 1500s is not going to react to somebody the same or to something the same way that somebody born in the 1990s is going to react to them. That's just personality wise, you know? Um, and there were history things and things that, you know, this vampire died in this book and this vampire was made in this book. I have to have all of that down pat. And so I had to go and um, I actually use a program online called World Anvil, and that works pretty well. For it was made originally for D&D dungeon masters to help keep your world straight, and it lets you like roll characters and things like that. But it's great; it has amazing world building, not software, but it has good prompts, if you will, and so it lets you keep your world all together. That's, you know, time consuming. And the more you get into any particular world, the more complex that's going to become and it becomes more important. Like I said, for a standalone book, it really wasn't a big deal. For a book that is part of a series, it becomes a much bigger deal. And for a book that is part of a larger series, like my vampire novels are intended to be, um, it's suddenly something that's very important. So yeah, there's work to do. You have to keep all that stuff together. Then we come to nonfiction. Nonfiction is a completely different animal, and yet you have the same thing. So instead of research about your world, suddenly you have to do research about real world things. So when I wrote my cookbook, I was talking about, you know, I know historically speaking, they didn't have potatoes, so I don't have any potato recipes in there. But I put in my recipe for Sakanjabin in my cookbook. And it's not historically accurate because I use plums and strawberries, and they likely didn't, either because they didn't have access to the things that I do or because they just didn't do that. They used mint and a couple of other things. But I like it that way. It's meant non historical. It says it's historical esque. Okay. Um, And so it's mentioned in there that that's the truth, but then I had to go do the research so that I could show what the original was. And that research was important when I was working on my grandmother's historical romance fiction. I had to look at what were the stores like in Scotland in 1942. What were, you know, what were the living conditions like? How, I mean, she was living with a guy she wasn't married to for a number of years, and they had kids together. How were people going to treat them? I had to look these things up. So there was that. And then, you know, my self-help book, I had to look into the history of the maxims and what they say and what they mean and why they're translated the way they are and what different translations mean. And so, I mean, it's very, the topics are very broad. So instead of world building, you're giving proofs. And so when you write a nonfiction, um, I mean, sure, you could just write a book and it's your opinion and that's the end of it. But it's not just that, and it never is just that. You have to, or you should, be showing why it's that way. So my recipes, if I've taken a recipe from somewhere and then changed it and made it my own and I use it in my cookbooks, I need to tell where that came from. Am I legally required to? No. But you can bet there's going to be a reference to it in my bibliography. Why? Because I would want somebody to do the same to me in return, but also because it's just the right thing to do on a moral level. And so these are things that you really have to take into account. Neither fiction nor nonfiction are easier to write. They're just very different. And so it takes time and effort no matter which one you are doing. With that said, I wanted to talk to you briefly about the fact that I can now have guests on my little podcast here. StreamYard, which is what I'm using, as you can see by the little duck up here. Isn't he cute? The headphones. StreamYard allows me to do split screen and have other people on my show and do presentations and stuff like that, which I'm very excited about. And so the end result of this is that I am going to have my friend Justin Hughes on from Smokey to Van. And he is, first off, the person who inspired me to start the Van Life Cookbook. Okay, so I owe this entirely to him. And second off, he's just a very good friend. And so he will be on the show on Wednesday, January 26th, which, by the way, is my 51st birthday. So you can all join me for my birthday. I don't have the time yet, but it's going to be like this. It'll be recorded, so you can watch it whenever you like. So if you do show up and you have questions, you can ask them, and we will do our best to answer them. But that will be sometime on January 26th. I will let you know times as we get a little bit closer. And he'll be talking with me about a whole bunch of stuff. He'll be talking about cooking in a van. He's going to be talking about traveling and van life in general, some of the fun and exciting events that he's attending or has attended in the past few months. And I'm hoping that we'll probably get a little guest appearance by Lister, who's his cat. So that's where I am at for the moment. I hope I will see you on the 26th. Looking at my calendar here. Talk to me a little bit about what you write. Do you write fiction or nonfiction? Do you write both? Do you have an interest in one and not the other? Why? Why not? Come chit chat. Facebook's probably the best way, but I also look at my comments here on YouTube, so feel free. And don't forget to subscribe. I think it's down here somewhere. Here, somewhere around there. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you guys next week, and then the week after, you will get to see Justin. Yay!